Now to the news. Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine says he has escaped from house arrest after the police denied claims from his party that he had been seized by a helicopter. Wine's party had said a helicopter landed in the grounds of his house in the capital, Kampala, and forcibly took him to an unknown location. He has since issued a statement saying he managed to escape during the night raid by the security forces and was no longer at his home, but his wife and other relatives were still under house arrest. Meanwhile, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has won his 7th term in office. The Electoral Commission announced from Kampala on Saturday, extending his 4-decade rule by another 5 years. Museveni, who's 81, secured 71.65% of the vote, while his main challenger, pop star turned politician Bobi Wine, trailed with 24.72% according to official results.
Yoweri to Haburwa Kaguta Museveni, 7,946,772. I repeat, Yoweri to Haburwa Kaguta Museveni, 7,946,772 votes. Total number of invalid votes cast is 275,353. Total number of invalid votes cast 275,353, amounting to 2.42% of the votes cast. Total number of votes cast is 11,366,201. I repeat, total number of votes cast is 11,366,201, amounting to 52.50% of the registered voters. Now, therefore, candidate Yoweri to Haburwa Kaguta Museveni, having obtained the highest number of votes in the election and the votes cast in his favor being more than 50% of the valid votes cast at the election, the Commission hereby declares.
Well, Museveni, they're winning again for Uganda. I'll be discussing that top story now with Hamilton Odunze, an international affairs analyst. He joins me from Boston, Massachusetts. Great weekend to you, Hamilton. Good to have you join us today on The World. Thank you for making out time, by the way. How do international actors, particularly Western countries and international organizations, contribute to the perpetuation of authoritarian rule in Uganda through their diplomatic and economic engagements? And what are the implications of their silence on human rights abuses?
Well, thank you for having me, Olije. The Western world contributes to the perpetuation of authoritarian rule in Uganda primarily through engagement, security, regional stability, and development interests prioritized over human rights and democratic governance. For example, despite Museveni's increasing authoritarian rule since 1986, Western powers, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, have provided diplomatic support, often looking over his human rights violations. The U.S. has provided over $1 billion in military assistance and training over the last 2 decades. Also, there is inconsistent pressure on condemning human rights abuses and election rigging. But there have been, recent shifts in response to the 2023 Homosexuality Act and continuous repression. The U.S. removed that from African Growth and Opportunity Act, and the US and the UK have imposed sanctions on specific officials, for corruption.
what role do technological tools such as biometric voter verification and the internet shutdowns play in manipulating electoral outcomes in Uganda, and how can international observers ensure the integrity of future elections? I mean, we're talking about Museveni being in power for, what, 40 years plus now?
Right, right. Technology plays a critical role in election outcomes, not just in Uganda, but everywhere in the world. In Uganda, we saw that role in the January 15th general elections, where both biometric and internet shutdowns were central to allegations of electoral manipulations. Before the election, the Ugandan Communication Commission, UCC, ordered a nationwide internet blackout starting at 6 p.m. The shutdown prevented opposition agents and observers from sharing real-time updates. The National Unity Platform, led by Bobi Wine, relies heavily on social media for mobilization and monitoring. The internet blackout disrupted their coordination and communication. The use of 109,000 biometric voter verification kits was intended to prevent fraud, but widespread malfunctions were reported on election day. To ensure the integrity of elections in Uganda, international observers must pressure the government to provide internet access and implement rigorous monitoring throughout the electoral cycle.
I mean, we already have the election results. So what do you know? I mean, and I know that during the course of that election following up yesterday, there were glitches, with regards biometric. But then how might the outcome of Uganda's election impact regional stability in East Africa with Museveni winning, particularly given the country's strategic location and Museveni's influence in regional organizations like the East African Community?
Right, right. The outcome of Uganda's election has a regional impact. It can spark regional instability due to potential unrest over contested results, government crackdowns on oppositions, and challenges to President Museveni's long rule. If Uganda experiences significant unrest, it could mirror or inspire similar patterns of protest, repression, and instability seen recently in countries like Tanzania and Kenya. And a destabilized Uganda could also impact regional security efforts, potentially affecting ongoing counterterrorism operations.
So what are the, what are the implications for Bobi Wine's defeat for opposition politics in Uganda, and how might the opposition regroup and develop a more effective strategy for challenging the NRM rule?
Olije, Bobi Wine's defeat carries several significant implications for Uganda. The first is that it consolidates Museveni's 40-year reign as one of Africa's longest-serving leaders. The election was marked by widespread repression, with security forces raiding Bobi Wine's home and taking him to an unknown destination. It also shifts the focus to Museveni's son to succeed his father. Currently, he heads the armed forces and is viewed as the most likely successor. There are concerns of human rights abuse. There have been reports of hundreds of arrests, which could lead to more international scrutiny. Wine's defeat, it signals a return to a more entrenched military-backed status quo for Museveni.
So now let's turn to the issue of security and stability in that region. What are the implications of the election outcome for Uganda's security and stability, given the opposition's claims of violence and intimidation? I mean, you heard from Bobi Wine, you've read up on him saying, he was sort of arrested and his family is still under house arrest.
Yes, if like I said before, the implications, if Uganda experiences significant unrest, it could mirror or inspire similar patterns of unrest that like we've seen in Kenya. And then the question of who will succeed Museveni, who is seeking a seventh term at 81, has remained a central and sensitive issue in Uganda politics. Museveni has not officially named or endorsed a successor, but several scenarios are currently under discussion. There is the Muhoozi project, where Museveni's plan for hereditary succession Museveni's son has openly discussed his presidential ambition and is widely seen as the heir apparent. He has been promoted to command the army in 2024. His supporters see him as a guarantor of a peaceful managed transfer of power. The likelihood of opposition taking over from Museveni is improbable. The army's allegiance will ultimately determine the successor.
Right. How about regional implications? How might, Museveni's re-election affect regional dynamics, particularly in relation to neighboring countries like Kenya? We have Tanzania.
Yes, the regional implications are big, Elijah. If Uganda experiences significant unrest, it could mirror or inspire similar patterns of protests, like I said, repression and instability seen recently in countries like Tanzania and Kenya. And a destabilized Uganda could impact regional security efforts, potentially affecting ongoing counterterrorism operations. There is also a shift in global alliance. Museveni is expected to continue diversifying partnership towards China, Russia, and the UAE. This will reduce to a significant extent vulnerability to Western democratic pressure.
So now we're not talking about unrest, in Uganda. I'm looking at Museveni continuing his term, just as the electoral body has announced his winning. How does that impact regional stability in that region, not the unrest for now?
Well, the regional stability is at stake. What happens is in places like this, there is always a spillover of refugees. There's always also a spillover of power vacuum, which actors like terrorists can cash in and begin to destabilize the region. So that's the problem that we are seeing, and analysts are seeing. The regional impact is great, but the issue is that it could result in external actors like terrorists taking control of the situation.
Okay. Now, finally, before I let you go, let's talk about succession and legacy. What are the potential, scenarios for Museveni's succession, and how might his legacy impact Uganda's future?
Right. The succession scenario centers on his son, Muhoozi, but it faces internal party challenges and public scrutiny that could create potential instability and power struggles. I have mentioned the Muhoozi project scenario where Museveni's son will succeed him. There are also other scenarios. For example, within Museveni's party, there is a contest for leadership if he eventually steps down. And this will likely create internal instability. Another scenario is also the rise of opposition. The opposition may eventually succeed in taking the leadership of Uganda. But in terms of legacy, his long tenure would be remembered by severe crackdowns of dissent, media control, and human rights violation.
All right. Thank you so much for making our time to join us today on The World. Hamilton Odunze joined us from Boston there. He's an international affairs analyst.